I want to thank our sponsor, Newmark Watch Company, who are a British-owned brand who create some stunning timepieces such as their classic 6BB, the 52 Field, the 71 Sports, and my current favourite, the 6BB MP Professional Panda. They are also launching a new model in the next few months in an ultra-limited run, with the pre-order details coming very soon, and you can find out first by following them on their social media pages linked in the description below, and also signing up to their mailing list via their website, newmarkwatchcompany.com. Thank you and enjoy. So you mentioned red flag before, let's talk about your two tours over there. What was that like?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting stuff. The RAF would send maybe 8 F3s. They would send GR1s, GR7s as well there, but send 8 F3s. One squadron would take the jets out there, and they do 2 weeks at red flag. Mm-hmm. And they ran the exercise for 2 weeks. I'm sure they probably still do something similar. Ran the exercise for 2 weeks with a building scenario over the exercise. Mm-hmm. Then all the squadrons that are there, the Americans and whoever else they invited, they go home at that point. And a new squadron group comes in, and they do the same exercise for 2 weeks. And the same happens again. The last part of the 6-week exercise is another set of squadrons, and then the last squadrons take the jets home.
Got you, right.
And that's why I ended up. The only time I've ever flown this aircraft behind us was on red flag, because I think it belonged to 25 Squadron at the time. So 25 Squadron flew the jets out for the first session, and we probably did the second or third session.
So did you enjoy the flying out there?
Yeah, flying was great. Big missions, 30, 40 aircraft.
It's crazy.
We were a small part of that. The mission lead is usually part of the strike package. Really interesting on the second one that I was there, the F-117s were playing.
Oh, nice.
And they weren't that interactive, it's got to be said. Oh. They went and did their stuff ahead of everybody else, and they did it really well. But it was pretty interesting. The range itself is enormous, and it's just north of Area 51, which everyone likes to talk about. Mm-hmm. And that was a no-go. There's they called it the box. The Area 51. Don't go inside Area 51. If you do, you go home. Mm-hmm. And you could see everything inside there in terms of the airfield, etc. You're flying past. You're only 10 miles away from the airfield. You can actually see it. It's really interesting whilst you're in the middle of a fight. And whilst I was there were German F4s flying, and I do remember that the German squadron commander flew into Area 51. And when they got to the debrief, they said, "Who's pod such and such?" And he put his hand up and they said, "You're out." And that was the end of the exercise for him.
So do you have any memorable stories from your time at Red Flag?
I do remember a couple of sorties where we had good results against the F-15s as aggressors. And they were firing semi-active at us, so it felt sort of parity in terms of the going against a Russian threat or something similar to that. But at the same time, I remember having 2 good sorties. I also remember going out there, doing all the prep, all the setup, getting refueled, pressing at the start of the mission, and getting shot down in the first wave. And having to turn around and go home. That's it.
You don't get to
Okay. You don't regenerate.
Yeah, regenerate
at that point.
Okay.
So, but I have better memories, or more memories of doing well than of doing bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what was the social side like?
It was great because you're in Las Vegas, and so lots of casino action. Good fun. Mm-hmm. Good fun. Everybody had a bit of fun in casinos. You were given some allowance for food over the time period you were there, so a lot of people took their allowance and spent it in the casino straight away. So they're now on their own money from the rest of the time there.
So you also flew into Miramar. Can you briefly tell us about this story?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. We had 2 days at Red Flag where the weather was poor, and there's a lot of aircraft, and there's a big sanctuary plan to try to keep people safe, but you can't really run it in bad weather. And we put our hands up and said, well, this is just like Scotland. So how about we, whilst nobody else is flying, we'll go and do some 4v4 or something in the bad weather in the range. And they said, no, our range is closed for 2 days. So the boss said, let's go somewhere else and do some of our own stuff. So we went and did a 2v2 or something like that, and landed into Miramar, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I took a nice picture of the tower.
Oh, the
famous tower at Miramar, from the back of our F3 after we landed, and we went to the O Club, try to give it Top Gun action. It was pretty quiet. It was a bit of a letdown, but it was really nice to go there. It's nice to do something and not just sit around for 2 days doing nothing back at base.
Dave, you then went on to 56 as an instructor. Did you want to do this?
Yeah, I was had the choice when I finished my staff tour to go to 43 treble 1 or 56. I wanted to go back to Lookers, and I chose to go to 56 because I actually had a great time when I was on 43 and treble 1 being a convex officer. So new people in the squadron, take them under your wing, mentor them, and enjoyed flying with people who were new to the aircraft. And so I went and did that.
What was an average day as an instructor? Would you be flying every day? Would it be different students every time, or would you be sticking to a couple, like under your wing, as it were?
Different students every time.
Okay.
Flying every day. It was a big squadron. We had 20 F3s. It was the biggest fast jet squadron in the Air Force. We'd run a big wave in the morning, maybe 12 aircraft. Then a smaller wave, and then a tiny wave. As the aircraft broke through the day, they were getting long in the tooth. They weren't the most reliable, but we had an advantage because over the frontline squadrons, because you could actually fly an aircraft that was limited. So if the radar wasn't working properly, you could still fly it as a target.
Okay, got you.
If it was a twin sticker and the radar wasn't working particularly well, you could still fly it to do a test of a pilot for general handling. So we had a little bit of an advantage there. But in terms of actually flying the mission, you'd already know about the students. Everybody shared information about students. They had a folder where everything was written up about them. We talked about them on a Friday afternoon every week.
Oh no!
So everybody knew about the students. But you would go to the student folder, have a look and see how they've done the last sorties, to actually sign off against the bottom of those previous to say, I've read that before flying with them. It was really important, because then you could look at where they were weak and try to bring them on, and you wouldn't try to catch them out. You'd actually try to coach them and make sure that you talked about those weaknesses in the brief before you went flying, and then you could prompt them in the air if things weren't going particularly well. But you certainly would try to be on their side.
And do the students have a sort of like, you get 3 goals kind of thing, or 3 ticks, and then if you don't pass the next sortie or something, you're out? How did that work?
Yeah, well, there was a review process with different levels, and if you failed a sortie, then you would definitely go into level 1 review, which was pretty much a straight refly. But talking about why did we fail, what, and what are we going to do differently next time? If there starts to be a bit of a repeating pattern, then you can increase the levels of the review. And we didn't lose many students whilst I was in the OCU, but we did. So we got to the stage where you've got a level 3 review, the student fails a sortie, and then that's pretty much end of the line.
That must have been a hard conversation to have with students.
Extremely hard. I did think, based upon my previous experience, I was thinking, probably saved your life and maybe saved somebody else's.
Yeah, absolutely. So, would you fly clean or with the tanks on 56?
I fly clean all the time, which was great. Yeah, so most, there was a basic radar phase, then we went on to air combat phase. So basic radar is nav heavy, air combat, pilot heavy, but then you went into BVR, air combat, which is both of them. So you do a BVR setup into air combat maneuvering at the visual merge, and then go into the pairs phase later on, where you're operating as a pair and going up to 2v2.
So how long did you spend on 56 as an instructor?
That was 3 years. So I was a flight commander, I was the executive officer, but I was also an instructor, and it was a really good time. Enjoyed teaching students and bringing them on.
And then you became OC of 1435 flight. How did this happen, and did you look forward to it?
Oh yeah, I did look forward to it. I'd already been in the Falklands many times.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, I guess with the 1435 time, I've spent over a year of my life in the Falklands. And it was a four-month stint, and it normally was given to a squadron leader as they came towards the end of their tour. And normally people are ducking and diving from it and trying to get out of it, but I actually wanted to go and do it. And so I put my hand up and went down there. And 56 was definitely my best squadron tour, but my best 4 months in the Air Force, probably down in 1435 flight. Really.
What was the flying like down there as well? Was it completely different from UK and Europe?
Yeah, so you're down there to provide deterrence and reassurance. So that's done through QRA as the deterrence, live armed aircraft on readiness all times. But the reassurance side of it was presence flying around. That you would get a call from one of the outlying villages somewhere on West Island saying, we haven't seen a tornado for a few days, where are you guys, and you're actually going to see them on the next sortie. So people wanting you to fly over the top of their house. So that was we do a lot of sort of canned flying in terms of 1v1s. We could fly up to 4 aircraft at a time, so you could do something more interesting, but a lot of the time you did a lot of low-level flying. And because you were live armed as well, there was a lot of extra checks to go through to make sure nothing went wrong, flying live armed and doing some training. I talked about last time, before, about training and pulling the trigger 10 times in a sortie. Well, you didn't touch the trigger when you were flying in a live armed aircraft. So there was a few other checks to go through. One of the reasons why people go down to the Falklands for only 6 weeks, the crews that I had on 1435 flight, they only came for 6 weeks. One of the reasons is the flying is limited, and the flying is pretty much low level most of the time. So you probably really need to go and do that and not be doing it for a very long time, and also come home to do some more monthly simulator for your emergency checks and things like that. So that was a good excuse, but really you didn't want somebody flying low level for longer than 6 weeks in the Falklands.
So it sounds like you had a great time over there.
I had a fantastic time. I had some interesting, saw an Argentinian once. That was in 1998. It was an S2, not whilst I was OC 1435, but whilst I was down there. That was an S2 tracker, a Grumman tracker. It's so they were using it for fisheries protection, but it's also kind of for searching for surface vessels and whatnot. And they were operating inside our area of interest. So I was scrambled with another guy off Treble 1 Squadron, and off we went. And the radar performed amazingly well.
Yeah.
He was below about something like an 800-foot cloud base, but miles out over the sea. So we managed to get underneath there, the radar showing his perfect picture of where he was, and we just followed him around for a bit. I don't think he was too happy with us following him around. And of course we were doing a racetrack, because he was flying extremely slow. He was like 180 knots, something like that.
Yeah. So Dave, how many hours did you get on the F3, and how would you sum up the jet?
I didn't quite make 2,000 hours, which is a bit of a shame. And it was a long time, sort of 10 years on the aircraft, but flying in the OCU, you didn't get that many hours every month. Summing up the jet, when I left the jet, it was a great platform.
Yeah.
I talked about a night fighter, good at flying and being a good fighter in bad weather and at night. You basically had radar upgraded to stage 3 standard. The radar was great at that point. You had all of the systems, things like the radios, the LINs, GPS, that had all been digitized, and so you didn't have to worry about managing any of that. You could concentrate on the job at hand, and then add on top of that AMRAAM and ASRAAM, and it really was a capable aircraft at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also worked on the Typhoon project. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, sure. I was when I left my second F3 tour, I went and did a course called the GD Aerosystems course. It's just about taking aircrew and giving them a year's worth of, it's like an MSc course in airborne technology, and it kind of puts you in a position to be flight trials officer or into procurement, trying to create well, they tried. And so after that course, I was posted to Wharton, where they were testing the Eurofighter, and I was focused on DA4, the development aircraft for the 4th prototype of the Typhoon. It's called Eurofighter then. And that was the main radar test platform. So we had ECR-90 on board, and we were doing test flying of that ECR-90. I devised the trials for that, and one reason why it was important for me to be there was that the trials the industry were doing were quite simple, and I was coming in and saying, well, an enemy's not going to fly like that. They're going to do something a little bit more difficult. Yeah. So let's add that in. So that was part of my role there. And then I went on a desk job in the Typhoon IPT down at Abbey Wood, and then desperate to get back to the F3 after that.
Brilliant stuff.
So Mike, this is a Skyflash missile. The front end of the Skyflash where the seeker is. It was a really good seeker for look down situation, so it could hold targets in a look down situation. And as you go back, these here, this is a training round, but they represent the fuse of the missile. So if the missile got within a set distance of the target, it's never usually going to actually hit the target, but as it goes by, this fuse senses the target and then causes the warhead to explode. There's a lot of sort of electronics and hydraulics in here, and these are the wings. So in order to maneuver the missile, these wings move. They're locked out at the moment. And then this here is where the warhead was. That fuse is going to set off the warhead that sits in this area here. And then finally, you've got the motor covering this length. And there were a couple of standards of Skyflash that we used. One was called TEMP, Tornado Essential Modification Program, and the other one was called Super TEMP, which had an improved motor in it. So the original motor was a boost motor of 3 or 4 seconds long, and then we changed to the Super Temp with an initial boost and then a sustain to keep the missile speed up for longer, up to about 8 seconds, 9 seconds, something like that. So better range.
Good stuff.
Okay, I'll go right to left. Yep. Down here you've got the main radio. You've got the computer controllers and the waveform generators, so just on-off switches there. This is the twin LINs GPS, so laser IN system plus GPS on board. Bit of a communications panel here. That's the identification friend or foe, so or the transponder, so we set a code on there. This is the IFF interrogator, so it's the same in terms of identification friend or foe, but this is us using the radar to find other people and see whether they've got the right code on. Here's the central warning panel, but 70 lights on here for different failures and whatnot. This is the command eject, So if you went flying on Squadron, you would put that to both there, which meant if the navigator pulled the handle, both ejection seats would leave the aircraft. If you're flying with a passenger, that would be in the rear position. Obviously, instruments here. This is the data link panel. Data link was a really good addition to the aircraft, and our data link, probably didn't mention this before, our usage of the data link, Link 16, was better than the F-14 because we had the ability to change the main computer software through some really smart guys at Coningsby called the software maintenance team. They had the ability to change the main computer software in a very quick time, and we really jazzed it up and made the very best use of the JTIDs. That's the main radar control panel, and you, as a navigator, you'd be working the radar control panel, for example, range selection, how many bars you're using on the radar, so the radar sweeps left to right, and how many times up and down it goes, the radar width, and then here's the controller. There's maybe about 15 different things you can do on the controller to manipulate the radar or manipulate the targets that you've selected for firing at. You probably can't see them too well. There's chaff and flare control panel here. The towed radar decoy looked exactly the same as this, but it was somewhere else, probably down here. This is the controller for the radar homing and warning receiver. This is the missile control panel. Under the yellow and black flap here is selective jettison. So if you took off on a heavy and hot with tanks on board, and you had an engine failure, the nav might punch the tanks off from there in order to help the aircraft fly away. Bit of radar control panel down here, selecting the different channels for the radar, and also there's another radio back here which has got an anti-jam capability, half-quick radio. And I didn't mention up here the screen for the radar homing and warning receiver. When I arrived on the aircraft, it was down here, which is kind of out of your scan, but we moved it up there as part of the Gulf War modifications. And total fuel right here, which is important. In this mode, without any tanks on, it was 5.5 tons of fuel. When the engines were in combat power, they were burning 500 kgs a minute. So you want to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions from Alexander Vata here, if you're happy to answer them, Dave.
Yeah, sure.
So this is on Bosnia. What did a typical mission tasking look like, and what was mentally, operationally different compared to the training?
So a typical tasking was 4 hours in the opt-in flight area of responsibility, and you would be tasked by AWACS. So there was an AWACS looking after you, and they would be in contact with the bunker at Vicenza, where the main decision maker was if you ended up seeing an aircraft in the no-fly zone. We never saw any fixed wing aircraft violating the no-fly zone, but we did see helicopters violating the no-fly zone. So you'd find, it might be a vector towards a helicopter that either you've seen on your radar, or more likely the AWACS has seen, somewhere else in the AOR. You vector towards it, then you put your radar on it, try to find that helicopter, and then try to get eyes on the helicopter. Because of the low-level ground threat, you'd usually stay above 10,000 feet at that point. And if the helicopter was seen and was still in the air, then you would have a series of warnings to read out. So I'd have that on my knee pad and read out a warning to the aircraft. And you give a position. I remember doing one at night where there was a helicopter below us. We thought it was still airborne. We got a glimpse of it. We thought it was still airborne. With night vision goggles, so we can see them. And I gave the position, and I said, flying at that place, you must land immediately, or otherwise you'll be shot down. And there was a an airliner about 200 miles away had heard this.
Really?
It's not me.
Great stuff. And the second one from Alex here. Which skills were truly critical for a navigator in the F3, and above all, which skills did a nav have to bring that the people in the front seat didn't?
Well, on the F3, you had to bring the skill of operating a radar, which was a 1970s gusting 1980s radar. So that was quite intense. It had a little bit of raw information on it. Modern radars, everything's synthetic, and everything is so it's to make it as simple as possible for the pilot. But back then, there was a bit of raw information, which was really useful because you could get a hint that a target was, for example, maneuvering, and that would show in the raw information before it would show in the computer generated information of the heading of the target. So you're looking closely at that, and you had to have that skill, but you didn't bring anything necessarily different to the pilot other than that skill. And in terms of communication between the nav and the pilot, the best scenario in the F3 was when two competent people flew it, and there was hardly any chat in the cockpit.
I've heard that before, yes.
It's because a modern aircraft, in terms, modern enough that the pilot can look at the head-down display, he can see the information. You see the height the target's at, you can see the heading they're doing. So he or she can make that decision to start taking, geometry moves, and there's no need for the nav at that point to be saying anything. Keep yourselves nice and quiet, build the essay, listen to what else is going on outside the cockpit. Try and give yourself the time to think about the difficult things rather than the easy things, which is making a decision on which way to turn against the target.
Brilliant stuff. And the last one from Alex. How big was the technological leap from the F3 in its final form to the first operational Typhoons?
Well, the F3 in its final form was pretty good, as it talked about, and of course the weapons platform was AMRAAM ASRAAM at that point, and that's exactly what's on the Typhoon. But of course the platforms itself, in terms of manoeuvring, was chalk and cheese. I flew in DA4, and we came off of one intercept, which was a mocked up 1v2 intercept against a couple of GR1s that were flown out of Wharton, and the pilot put the power up to military power, so no reheat or anything. And before we knew it, we were back at 35,000 feet. The engine's coming back again, so you're not spending a lot of fuel up there. That would have cost a lot of fuel to an F3 and a lot of effort to an F3. It was different. And the radar was different. The radar is fully synthetic, and to make it as simple as possible for the pilot. And it's got a lot of horsepower as well, so it's a bigger dish than what you see inside the F3, so it had bigger pickup ranges as well.
Well, thanks for those questions, Alex. And I've got a couple here to wrap up here, Dave. So, do you have any hobbies?
Oh, hobbies. Yeah, a couple. I'm playing a bit more golf at the moment, badly. I played a lot of golf when I was at Lookers, because it's beside St Andrews, and we used to have tickets to St Andrews. I'm trying to get back to those heady days. I do a couple of things, get involved with a couple of things which I'm quite passionate about. One is Commonwealth War Graves Commission. My dad's cousin was shot down over Denmark in 1943, and his Commonwealth War Grave is there. And I thought I'd give back a little bit by volunteering for Commonwealth War Graves, and I also volunteer as a speaker for the Scotland's charity air ambulance.
Oh, brilliant.
There's lots of air ambulances around, but in Scotland it's a real challenge. There's huge open spaces, pretty poor road networks, so the charity air ambulances make a massive difference. So I kind of help spread the word, because it is all paid for by charitable donations.
I think I know the answer to this one. Favourite aircraft you have flown?
Do you know what? I had a good think about this, because you did send me that question. My favourite time flying, it'll surprise you, was the Jet Provost.
Really?
And I'd love to fly the Jet Provost again. It was absolute raw navigation. And it was quite fun in that you basically had to tell a pilot to do everything. You're flying with a guy who's been in Jaguars or GR1s or whatever, Phantoms. He's sitting alongside you, and he wants you to do everything other than physically fly the aircraft. And it was great fun, really rewarding, and good fun visual navving. I love doing that.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me, for sure. One you would like to fly either past or present?
That I've not flown. Do you know, I've never flew in one of the F-jets, as we called it, the F-16 or F-15. That's a regret. Lots of people on the squadron did, and get that experience. I've flown in a Typhoon, but I'd love to go flying in a US F-jet. That'd be cool.
And can we find you online in any way? Have you got a presence on any of the social media?
Yeah, on LinkedIn and also on Facebook, where I've got my nice picture of flying in 56 Squadron over the top of Norway, and then a picture of me is actually in the place in Norway I was flying over 20 years later.
That's brilliant stuff. Well, Dave, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Been a pleasure.